What if the universe handed you the worst island imaginable? 100 square meters of bare rock, surrounded by nothing but open sea, and then quietly slipped two of the most broken talents in existence into your back pocket?
That is exactly what happened to Soyu. And by the time this story is done, the word impossible will have lost all meaning.
On December the 12th, year 22 of Water Blue Star, Soyu was 23 years old and doing something perfectly ordinary, fishing by a river, when a large fish yanked him under and drowned him.
Most people would call that the end of a story, but for Soyu, it was only the transition screen between one life and the next.
He opened his eyes under a sky the color of a fresh wound, stained deep crimson from one horizon to the other, and a cold, emotionless voice rolled down from nowhere in particular.
The voice told the world to fade to silence, told all things to return to the void, and then congratulated whoever was listening on facing a new life.
In the same instant those words finished, Water Blue Star vanished from the cosmos as cleanly as a candle being pinched out, leaving no trace that it had ever existed at all.
When Soyu's head cleared enough to actually take stock of his surroundings, his first coherent thought was that he was truly done for.
He was standing on a patch of bare land no larger than 100 square meters, hemmed in on every side by open ocean, with no shelter, no food, no water, and no idea which direction led anywhere worth going.
Then a half-mechanical voice rang in his ear, welcomed him to something called the endless sea of the return to void, confirmed that his current location was his island, and began listing the important matters he should review. Each newcomer could claim a novice survival treasure chest with random contents, the voice explained. Each newcomer received a novice fishing rod loaded with 10 portions of bait, and the rod was the tool used to fish items directly out of the sea.
The newcomer's island came with a 7-day novice protection period, a window of relative safety before the world showed its real teeth.
Higher prosperity value on the island unlocked more privileges, and every newcomer awakened one talent, its grade determined by personal luck, ranging from SSS at the top down to F at the absolute bottom. After the protection period ended, the voice warned with the same emotionless calm. All kinds of unexpected situations may come, and he had better build his island to cope. The light screen dissolved, and a translucent personal panel took its place in front of him. Level 1 Island Lord named Soyu, age 23, Strength 1, Constitution 1, Spirit 1.5, plus 1 of each as an island bonus that only applied while he remained on the island.
Island prosperity at 0, which was not surprising given that he had been standing here for approximately 2 minutes. Then his eyes landed on the talent line, and everything else on the panel became irrelevant background noise.
S-grade insight, the single highest talent grade in the entire system, and beneath it, something listed as unknown grade double happiness, marked as upgradable.
Soyu stared at the 2 entries and wondered, in the quiet part of his mind, whether transmigrating twice in a row had somehow glitched the system into handing him 2 talents instead of 1. The talent details filled in immediately, as if the system had been waiting for the question.
The insight talent let him perceive all things and pull information that ordinary people simply could not access, with a power that scaled upward as his strength rose.
There was also a note buried in the fine print. When insight detected an entity it could not fully probe, it automatically entered a concealed state, which meant even its limits were quietly covered. The double happiness talent doubled all resources obtained from opening treasure chests, and a separate note specified that special chests required completing a trial before the double reward triggered. After reading both entries twice, Soyu allowed himself one small moment of absolute satisfaction, and then got to work. The golden novice survival treasure chest was already glowing on his screen beside a shadowy fishing rod, and the system asked whether he would claim both along with the bait.
He confirmed, the chest swung open, and double happiness triggered automatically.
The system rewarded him with 2 1.5-liter bottles of mineral water and 2 5-packs of Kongshui Fu instant noodles.
Soyu stared at the haul for a long moment, processing the fact that a golden chest had just given him counterfeit instant noodles, then decided that at least he would not die of thirst in the next 2 days. The description on the noodles gently suggested hot water rather than eating them dry, which told him the system had a sense of humor.
The novice fishing rod came in at 100 out of 100 durability, losing 1 point per item fished, and the ordinary beta came with could lure chests up to 2 stars from the sea.
Before casting a single line, Soyu tapped into the 2 channels the system had granted him, the regional communication channel and the regional trading channel, to see what everyone else was doing. The communication channel was already a wall of complaints, survivors cursing the system for giving them pots without water, rice without a way to cook it, and in one memorable case, a doll with no obvious survival value. Reading the wall, Soyu quietly concluded that water and noodles was actually quite lucky, and walked to the edge of his tiny island with the rod in hand. He did not cast immediately. He let his insight talent settle on the water and read it, and the first 2 edges came back as scarce and average, both recommending he moved. The 3rd edge returned abundant, recommended for fishing, and Soyu's mood lifted before the float had even touched the water. He cast gently, sat cross-legged on the bare rock, and waited with the patience of a man who had already died once and had nothing left to prove. The float plunged, he jerked the rod, and a 1-star common wood chest surfaced. 10 pieces of ordinary wood inside, confirmed before he even pulled it ashore, because Insight read the chest the instant it hooked. He opened it. Double happiness triggered, and 20 pieces of ordinary wood appeared in front of him. The description told him 100 pieces would build a 15-square-meter shelter, which meant he was a fraction of the way there and needed to keep fishing. The second cast hooked something with real resistance, a pull so different from the first chest that Soyu felt a spike of genuine excitement even before Insight delivered its verdict. A 1-star chest containing a Type 59 pistol and 8 rounds of ammunition, with a note recommending close range for maximum effect. Having a gun, even a short-range one, was simply better than not having a gun, and with 2 pistols in hand once Double Happiness finished his work, Soyu loaded 1 magazine, aimed at a stack of wood, fired a single test round, and put the weapons down. A gun without ammunition was scrap metal, and he would not waste rounds on celebrations. The 3rd significant catch was the one that changed the temperature of the day entirely. The resistance on the 3rd notable chest was so much stronger than the 1-star that Soyu nearly went off the edge of the island when it first struck, saved only by the fact that he was not standing close enough to the water. Insight confirmed it was a 2-star monster chest, contents listed as 1 low-level goblin that would be released upon opening, requiring him to defeat or kill it to claim the reward. The goblin's stats rolled out: Strength 1.5, Constitution 2, Spirit 1.5, armed with a broadsword, described as the most inferior of goblins with simple construction ability. Insight recommended using firearms, which was convenient given that Soyu currently had 2 pistols and 16 rounds in his possession. After 20 minutes of extreme pulling, the monster chest came ashore, and Soyu set the rod down, picked up both pistols, touched the chest, and opened it with silent intention. White light flashed. A hunched figure under 1.5 meters tall appeared, and before it could register where it was, Soyu pulled the trigger and put 5 rounds into it. The system pinged him on a kill, then offered 2 rewards: 1 low-level goblin slave, or the goblin's construction knowledge. He chose the slave without hesitation. Double Happiness gave him 2 slaves. 2 goblins identical to the dead one materialized on his 100-square-meter rock island, their faces filling with fervent expressions the moment they saw him, both dropping to their knees to kiss his shoes. Soyu moved his foot away with something between distaste and resignation, then told them in the flattest voice he could manage to use the wood and build him a bed, a table, and some stools. They replied that they understood and rushed at the woodpile like their lives depended on it, which technically they did. The system pinged almost immediately after. His island's prosperity value had risen, and he was ranked first in this area, the first survivor to break past 0. The regional communication channel erupted with questions about who the first-ranked big shot was and how to raise prosperity, and Soyu felt nothing about the praise, but understood the strategic value of goodwill. He posted one message telling the channel that prosperity was tied to the number of living beings on the island and to buildings, and that anyone who built even a basic shelter would see the results for themselves. The channel exploded with thanks, mixed immediately with the usual chaos of someone offering black stockings for water and someone else demanding to know why their first day had broken them completely. Soyu closed the channel and kept fishing. What followed over the next several hours was a steady accumulation of goods that would have looked insane to any other survivor watching from the outside.
Windproof lighters, fresh apples, more wood, a wooden house blueprint, an ordinary energy crystal, a bamboo mat, and then, on the last two casts, a set of pots and bowls, followed by an ordinary small car with a full fuel tank. The car arriving on an island 10 meters wide was a special kind of absurdity that Soyu sat with for a full 30 seconds before deciding it was still better than sleeping on the ground.
Double happiness turned one Toyota into two Toyotas, which scared the goblins back to their knees. He told them to get up and get back to work, then slid into the driver's seat, adjusted the angle, and rested.
10 casts in one day was mentally expensive, and most of it had been physically demanding. But what Soyu had gained in that time was in a different category from everything the rest of the regional survivors combined had pulled. Without insight pointing him at abundant zones, without double happiness doubling every chest he opened, his situation would have looked exactly like the people whining in the channel about damaged chests and waterlogged socks. Instead, he had wood, water, food, lighters, a blueprint, an energy crystal, 2 goblins, and 2 Toyotas on a 100-square-meter rock in the middle of the ocean. He took a bite from one of the apples and dipped back into the communication channel to check on the rest of the world. The system pinged him that his time at the top of the regional leaderboard had qualified for privileges: 5 extra daily trades with pinning rights on the trade channel, 5 extra daily messages with pinning rights on the chat channel, and a series of leaderboard treasure chest rewards at 1-day, 3-day, 5-day, and 7-day intervals. The chat was harder to read at that point, survivors begging the system to send them home because their children were too young and their parents were too old. The system answered everyone in one breath, telling all survivors that humans under 14 and over 60 had other arrangements, and that the only path back to loved ones was to survive. The channel ignited with renewed purpose, people promising themselves they would live, and Soyu, who belonged to the Lone Star type, with no one waiting for him on either side of the transmigration, felt that particular message land lighter than it landed for most. He closed the chat and moved on. That night, Soyu cooked instant noodles in a pot over a fire the goblins built, threw 2 packs their way as a calculated act of investment. A well-fed worker was still a working worker, and ate his own bowl watching the fire. The 2 goblins, enchanted by the taste of Kang Shufu noodles for reasons that said a great deal about goblin cuisine, developed a powerful incentive to finish their woodworking as fast as possible. After dinner, he slid into one Toyota, switched on the air conditioning rather than deal with the dropping night temperature, reclined the seat, and let the goblins stand night watch by the bonfire. They were loyal enough to walk into the sea on a single word, so standing guard was nothing. Day 2 opened with Soyu claiming his 20-portion daily bait reward for holding first place, casting with ordinary bait and eating bread with his free hand, the sort of casual confidence that comes from knowing your supply chain is sorted. He dropped the fishing nets he had fished up into the sea, baited with 10 portions each, staked the ropes, and let the goblins mind the pool while he worked the rod for higher star chests. The communication channel by this point had been running long enough for some smart survivors to piece things together, and a private chat request arrived from someone named Wang Dong, who had met Soyu's energy crystal filter requirement. Wayne Dong, whose position on the regional prosperity board had been climbing steadily after he talked Soyu into sharing the bait crafting formula, was the first of what would become a recurring cast of sharp survivors who found it worth their while to stay in contact with the man at the top.
So you told him one ordinary energy crystal crushed into 300 grams of flour made 30 portions of ordinary bait, gave him the full formula without attempting to trick him, and explained simply that the region only developed if everyone got their bait sorted. The information rippled outward from Guangdong to the regional channel within hours, and the channel went into an uproar about who had known first and why they had not shared earlier, with most of the arrows pointing at Soyu.
He did not click into chat, because the people celebrating the information spreading were the same people who would have used it to pressure him into free handouts had he posted it himself, and he had no patience for that particular game.
Gay Chong-yu, fourth on the regional leaderboard with an A-rank talent called Six Senses Enhancement, was the next to open a private channel with him, trading 2+1 island fragments and an energy crystal for the fishing rod upgrade formula and a rod blueprint.
So you gave her the information, took the materials, and upgraded his novice rod to an ordinary fishing rod the same afternoon. 100 durability dark rod, capable of fishing from half-star all the way to 5-star chests.
With enhanced bait in the equation, paired with the new rod, the theoretical ceiling on his fishing suddenly looked very different. He still had only 4 portions of enhanced bait, and the 5-star chests were a different animal entirely from anything he had pulled before. But the road forward was clear. On his first attempt with enhanced bait, after half an hour of waiting, the rod locked onto a 5-star chest and the pull nearly ripped him off the island. He braced his lower body like a nail driven into the ground, worked the intermittent technique Insight has shown him, and spent a full hour backing up, releasing, pulling, and anchoring before the chest finally surfaced. Inside, 10 ordinary energy crystals, doubled to 20 by double happiness. So you lay on the ground and panted at the sky, calculating that 20 crystals crafted into bait with double happiness would produce 600 portions, enough to fish until his arms cramped and still have surplus. He had achieved ordinary energy crystal freedom on day 2. By the time night fell on the second day, his tiny island had become almost comically overstocked. A European-style wooden cabin from the blueprint, 2 Toyotas parked next to it, 4 goblin slaves carrying out a steady rotation of chores, a pile of unopened chests stacked in one corner of the cabin, and a massage chair he had fished up, positioned at a prime fishing spot. The rest of the regional survivors were still scrambling for fresh water and their second meal. He pan-fried 3 steaks over the bonfire that night, ate with the unhurried appetite of someone who had stopped worrying about food, and told the goblins to guard the fire and watch for movement. Before sliding into the Toyota and switching on the air conditioning, he posted a few windproof lighters on the trade channel as welfare. He had too many to use, and a calculated act of generosity built better trade relationships than any amount of pinned messages. The channel exploded with people racing to grab them and complaining about those who grabbed faster. He stopped watching and went to sleep. Outside the fence of his growing island, the sea moved quietly, restless, and full of things he did not yet know the name of. Morning of day 3 arrived with a leaderboard chest waiting to be claimed, the one-day prize for holding first place, and its contents were a +5 island area fragment, equivalent to 5 of the +1 fragments that required 2-star chests to fish. He activated it alongside 2 more +1 fragments from his chest pile and watched the island expand visibly, the edges pushing outward in a way that felt more real than looking at a number on a panel. Total area now sitting at 112 square meters, still not large enough for everything he was planning, but noticeably larger than the bare rock he had landed on. That morning also brought a readout from Insight that stopped him mid-stride on his island perimeter walk. The talent had gotten more granular overnight, or perhaps his increased stats had unlocked a sharper resolution, because now, instead of just flagging a stretch of water as abundant or scarce, Insight was reading specific star ratings from specific depths. 5-star chest, 5 meters down, 1 particular stretch, fishing recommended. He locked the spot, baited up with enhanced bait, and cast. The float dipped in about 10 minutes, which was fast for a 5-star chest, and Insight delivered the readout before the chest had even moved. A 5-star ordinary wooden chest containing 100 portions of forged profound iron,
a black material with a smooth jade-like sheen, and enough weight to make ordinary lifting unpleasant.
The note explained it was one of the materials needed to upgrade from ordinary fishing rod to black iron grade, paired with ice silkworm silk and a black iron upgrade blueprint. One more material down for the next tier upgrade, and one more confirmation that the system's escalating chest tiers were going to keep pulling him forward whether he planned for it or not. While he was fishing, the communication channel continued its daily theater, and Soyu kept one ear on it, purely for information.
Someone had opened a human being from a treasure chest, a male servant at 60 loyalty, and the channel immediately went into a discussion about whether loyalty below 60 meant defection risk, and whether anyone could open a bunny girl instead.
The human in question had been fished by Wang Dong, who spent the next several hours learning that a 60 loyalty subordinate had opinions about standing in the rain and preferences about being sent to collect drifting chests, and that every small act of disregard cost him loyalty points he had to buy back with noodles. So you read Wang Dong's private message asking whether he wanted a free human servant and mentally calculated the management cost of a 60 loyalty person against his current island operation, which ran on 400 loyalty goblins who would walk into the sea without complaint. He told Wang Dong to keep the man and contacted him again if he found something actually useful. The afternoon of day 3 produced 2 significant catches that would define the next several days of island development. The first was a simple fishing net from a 2-star chest, 10 durability, losing 1 per chest caught, operated by dropping bait into it and waiting for chests to enter on their own. The second was an ordinary water-repelling bead, a device that let the wearer move through water without resistance for 2 hours, recharging in sunlight at 10% per hour. The net was the one that changed the math on everything. Soyu immediately baited 2 nets with 10 portions each and staked them in the richest 2-star zones Insight could find, then went back to fishing rod work while the nets filled themselves. The first net pool came up with 10 chests, yielding among other things a 20 milliliter spirit attribute potion, and Soyu drank it without hesitation. A cool, ethereal clarity swept through his thoughts, sharper than the strength potion's electric tingle, and better than the constitution potion's ice and fire shock. And Soyu quietly rated the spirit potion first among the 3, simply on the quality of the sensation. The second net contained a surprise that changed his guard roster entirely. A pet chest holding an adult snow wolf, combat level exceeding an ordinary unarmed human. He considered for a moment and decided to store the chest unopened. It was the first time he had tested whether unopened chests persisted without vanishing, and they did, because a wolf that ate food and added no construction value was a liability he did not need yet. Keeping an eye on the nets became a background habit by late afternoon, and the island's prosperity climbed steadily as the pile of supplies inside the wooden cabin grew into something that would have caused visible distress in other survivors if they had seen it. His island had a European-style cabin, 2 Toyotas, fruit tree saplings and fertile soil patches across the expanded ground, 4 loyal goblin workers, and chest storage that was starting to feel less like a survival cache and more like a small warehouse. The system pinged him at the full day mark. He had held first place long enough to unlock the daily leaderboard chest sequence, and the one-day reward was a +5 fragment that he activated on the spot. His island was now at 117 square meters, and the thorn fence blueprint he had pulled earlier was almost buildable. He just needed a slightly larger island to fit the 10 by 10 enclosure without eliminating all this fishing space. Then the sky darkened, and the localized heavy rain hit. The system warned that weather was unpredictable, and Soyu was already walking fast toward the cabin with his goblins when the first drops struck. He had them cover the saplings and supplies with tarps, stepped indoors, and listened to the rain hammer the roof. The system-built cabin blocked it perfectly. Outside, the channel descended into chaos as survivors reported tent collapses, soaked supplies, and chests washing directly onto their islands from the surge. Soyu scanned the island from the window and watched half-star and no-star damaged chests accumulate at the edges, reading the highest incoming arrival as a half-star and deciding his time was worth more than any of them.
Other survivors were sprinting through the rain to grab anything that might wash back out, and at least one person in the channel reported getting swept off their island entirely.
He ate a peach that a quick-witted goblin had arranged on a plate, shared the rest among the 4 of them in a gesture that cost him nothing and bought him continued enthusiasm, and waited out the rain in the massage chair. The system note said post-rain fishing odds for high star chests were higher, and the moment the sky cleared, Soyu went directly to the edge. Insight confirmed it immediately. A 5-star wooden chest 5 meters down. Fishing recommended. He attached enhanced bait and cast, and after half an hour of careful reeling, he had landed a 100-milliliter set of all 3 attribute potions, Strength, Constitution, and Spirit, in large bottles, each one permanently raising its base attribute by 1 point. Double happiness made it 2 sets. 6 large bottles total. Soyu carried them to the cabin, sat in the massage chair, thought about it for approximately 30 seconds, and then started drinking. He was not brave enough to do all 6 at once, so he spaced them out, 1 bottle at a time, each one hitting harder than the previous small potions, each one leaving him in an involuntary shudder of effort. 3 hours later, drenched in sweat, he brought up his panel and read the results. Every base attribute had jumped by 2 full points, and his spirit was now at 4 3/10, closing fast on the 5-point threshold the potions needed to remain effective. He looked at his island, 139 square meters, a working cabin, 2 Toyotas, fruit saplings, 4 goblins, carnivorous plant seeds in the ground, and made a decision. He needed to level up the island itself, and the fastest way to do that was to find another island heart. The navigation map he had fished up a day earlier gave him the location of a deserted small island less than 3 nautical miles away, and the speedboat he had traded from Guangdong was fueled and ready. He stepped aboard with 2 of the goblins at the wheel and pointed in the direction the map indicated. The moment the boat left his island's perimeter, Insight pinged a warning. Sea monkey traces 5 meters below and behind the boat. He told the goblins to push speed. The outboard motor roared, the speedboat surged to over 30 knots, and the sea monkey, whatever its enthusiasm, could not keep up. 4 minutes later, a small island appeared ahead, and half a minute after that, Soyu stepped onto a deserted rock that smelled of something recently ended. A collapsed thatched hut sat at the center, its timbers marked with deep claw gouges that looked fresh enough to suggest the previous lord had not left voluntarily. He cleared the timber by hand. His strength was now well above baseline, and found a heavy, light yellow crystal beneath the rubble. Insight identified it as a level 1 island heart, conceived by the island after its lord's death, with a 6-month lifespan before it shattered, and a note that the island would collapse and sink within 1 minute of the heart being removed. He picked it up, at least 100 pounds, sprinted for the speedboat, leaped aboard, and told the goblins to go. The deserted island shook behind them as they pulled away, and by the time they were clear, it had collapsed entirely into the sea, as if it had never existed.
Back on his island, Soyu confirmed the integration, and the system congratulated him on being the first in the area to upgrade to level 2, adding 500 prosperity points and a special upgrade chest reward.
The level 2 upgrade chest contained 1 tier 1 marrow cleansing pill, with a description that promised ordinary people a complete physical transformation, and a list of refining ingredients that read like the material section of a cultivation novel. Double happiness gave him 2 pills. He swallowed the first without much preamble, felt a warmth spread from his abdomen through his whole body, spent exactly 3 seconds looking pleased with himself, and then sprinted for the makeshift toilet at a speed that would have concerned any onlookers. About 30 minutes later, a visibly pale young man supporting himself on the wooden door emerged from the toilet with trembling legs. He rested, drank water, changed clothes, and checked his panel. Strength and Constitution both passed the 5-point barrier, the island bonus now scaling more dramatically as the area had grown to 241 square meters following the heart integration. The marrow cleansing pill had broken the ceiling on his physical stats that the regular potions had been approaching, and the jump in the regional channel told him everything he needed to know about how visible his prosperity spike had been.
Someone had noticed that Region Number 1's prosperity had just jumped by 500 points in one go, and the channel was in collective shock.
People declared he must be using a cheat, asked whether he was even on the same Survivor server, and one person offered to become his leg accessory if it meant proximity to whatever resource he had found.
Soyu did not click into chat.
He had an island to run and a sea monkey to kill.
The persistent sea monkey had been circling his island long enough to become personal, and with his strength and constitution now clear of the 5-point line and 2 sabers from a 5-star chest hanging on the cabin wall, Soyu decided it was time to deal with it.
He stepped onto the speedboat with the 100 refined goose feather saber in hand, leaving the island's protection radius intentionally, and dangled a piece of raw meat on a rope into the flagged area. The sea monkey, which had apparently been nursing a grudge, felt the bait and surged upward, and Soyu's saber had already swung before it cleared the water.
The beheading was fast and clean, the head and body separating mid-pounce, patches of blood blooming across the surface.
He stepped back aboard, cursed the blood on the speedboat, and told the goblins to clean it while he went back to fishing. No chest reward came from killing the monster, which was mildly irritating, but the fishing spot was now clear, and that was worth more than irritation. That evening, a female sea monkey appeared, larger than the male, stronger, in a state of extreme hostility, and followed the perimeter of his island like a creature who had made a decision.
She could not breach the protection period barrier, but she paced the edge, shrieking, and Soyu watched her for a moment, then stepped onto the speedboat again.
She lost all self-control the moment he left the island. She leaped from the water under the moonlight, larger and more imposing than the male had been, and Soyu's saber met her mid-air with a single upward slash that did not kill in one blow. She had guarded with her hands on instinct, taking the first strike on her arms, at the cost of a wound that would have ended anything with weaker constitution, and the collision force rocked the boat. He steadied himself, yanked the saber free, and delivered a second strike that put her down. He noted for next time that his strikes needed to be more decisive. The first hit had been careless, and went back ashore to change the blood-soaked suit. That night, still restless from the exertion, he noticed a system-wide announcement that had absolutely nothing to do with sea monkeys.
300 humans from a recently destroyed low martial arts world would be added to each Water Blue Star Survivors novice area, with islands appearing near existing islands at any time.
Universal language had been implanted in all of them. They were not inherently friendly, and the system's cheerful advice for making friends was to try conquering them with personal charm. The communication channel immediately broke down into panic, with survivors predicting violent deaths at the hands of ancient martial artists, while cooler heads pointed out that the vast majority of this new world's population had been ordinary farmers rather than inner chi cultivating masters.
Soyu did not post anything. He was already at the edge of his island, rod in hand, when the mermaid guards he had earned earlier in the day surfaced with a report. 200 meters southeast, an island had appeared out of nowhere. He could not afford to leave an unknown variable that close without knowing what was on it. He organized his response with the calm efficiency of a man who had been fighting sea monkeys in the dark for 2 days and found this only marginally more urgent. 2 mermaid guards carrying 2 great sword skeletons underwater, himself diving with the water-repelling bead, and Galil the skeleton captain leading the approach. The man on the island was named Yupio, and insight read him out in full. Strength 3+2 from a martial arts bonus, Constitution 3.5, Spirit 1, armed with a 9-ring greatsword, carrying an iron shirt skill at minor accomplishment, 5 tiger breaking door blade at major accomplishment. Overall combat power ordinary tier 5 to 7.
Personality extremely vicious. Serial killer impossible to control. Recommended elimination.
The decision was made before the readout finished scrolling.
Soyu whispered to Galil to go ashore first and kill the opponent as quickly as possible, and the skeleton captain's soul fire flickered once before the head nodded. Yupio heard movement, looked up, and saw white flame skeletons emerging from the water under the moonlight, and his martial artist's courage lasted exactly as long as it took fear to win the argument.
Galil's saber met the 9-ring greatsword and snapped it at the impact point.
Before Yupio could process the fact that his weapon had broken, Galil's second strike from the chaotic cloak swordplay took his head.
What Soyu had not anticipated was what came next. The skeleton captain reached down, picked up the severed head, held it against his own skull, and let streams of white gas flow from the head into the soul fire in his eye sockets. He was absorbing soul power from a kill, and when Galil finished, every one of his base attributes had risen by 1 point, and his combat tier had climbed. Soyu stood on the island looking at the result of that experiment and felt something between scientific curiosity and a very specific kind of hunger.
He told the goblins to take Galil back, stepped onto the deserted island, and used the island heart that formed automatically after an island lord's death to expand his own island by another 56 square meters.
Total area 506 square meters, nearly a 20 by 25 box.
Back in the villa, because by this point his wooden cabin had been demolished and replaced by a 100 square meter 2-story villa that had come from a first-place prosperity chest, he lay on an actual mattress and let the day settle.
Then a system-wide notification hit that made sleep impossible. 300 humans from the destroyed low martial arts world were being added to his area, islands appearing at random near existing islands, with varying levels of combat ability and unknown talent awakening rates. The channel was reporting contacts already. A man who said a middle-aged nun had slapped him into the ground, a survivor who claimed someone was walking on water toward his island, and general escalating panic from people who had read too many martial arts novels and were now apparently living in one. He scrolled through the reports and locked on to the most useful thread. Someone named Ocean, who had been beaten and taken prisoner by a powerful older woman described as a right protector of the demonic cult of the former low martial world.
Ocean was still breathing, had apparently been kept alive because he was the only daily bait source his captor had access to, and was actively looking for a way out of a situation that he estimated would kill him in 2 or 3 days if nothing changed. Soyu opened a private chat with him, asked one question, "Can you shoot a gun?" And when Ocean confirmed that he could, posted a trade on the public channel and let Ocean claim 1 ordinary pistol through the system. On the island where the old nun was sitting in meditation with her eyes closed, Ocean lay very still in the dirt, breathed very carefully, and planned. The patience in him was something else. He waited until her eyes were closed, waited until the moment was exactly right, then called across the dirt that he had just received 2 more portions of ordinary bait for her.
She crossed to him in one brisk movement, demanded the bait, got his voice starting an answer, and then got 8 rounds at point-blank range instead.
2 landed where the body could not afford it. 1 in the neck, 1 through the heart. If either had drifted, she would have killed him on the way down.
They did not drift.
She hit the ground with the expression of someone who had not believed this particular scenario was possible. And Okian lay back and let out a breath that had been stored since the previous morning.
Soyu was already on the speedboat heading southeast.
He had watched the situation carefully enough to know Ocean had 1 shot at it, and by the time he arrived at the edge of the island, the old nun was already dead, and Ocean was staring at the sound of an approaching motor with very wide eyes. Insight gave him Ocean's data immediately. Strength 1, Constitution 1, Spirit 1.1, Talent Frank Rapid Speed, Overall Combat Power, Ordinary First Order.
So Soyu told Golio to go ashore first and take the gun away before he stepped onto the rocks himself, which produced in Ocean the immediate, complete shutdown of every nerve that had stayed functional through the prior 20 hours.
A man could shoot an old nun in cold blood and still lose his composure entirely when a flaming-eyed skeleton came at him faster than he expected.
So you offered him the choice plainly, surrender or die.
And no small tricks, no communication channel messages.
Ocean answered without delay. His loyalty registered at 30, which was the number of someone who was saying yes with his mouth while his brain was already drafting the next move. Soyu pressed a blade against his neck and told him what he wanted was the kind of surrender that lived in the heart and mind, not the kind that lived on the tongue.
The loyalty climbed to 70 and stopped.
Soyu handed him a loyalty potion.
Ocean stared at the green glow in the bottle, felt the blade still there, uncorked it, and swallowed.
As the potion took effect, something shifted in Ocean's chest, the man looking down at him becoming genuinely, inexplicably admirable, the kind of person a man would willingly place himself behind without needing a sword at his neck to justify it.
The system chimed a special reward. Soyu had successfully subdued his first island lord, and a special treasure chest, plus the option to condense the subjugated island's power into a heart, were both waiting for him.
He took both.
On the speedboat home, the two islands where the nun and Ocean had stood, both shattered and slid quietly into the sea.
Back on his island, the two level 1 island hearts expanded his area from 506 to 706 square meters, leaving him just 94 short of the level 4 island lord threshold. He claimed the special chest.
Inside, a special cultivation method, the Soul Scripture, first scroll, capable of strengthening the spirit attribute and, at higher mastery, allowing the practitioner to sway the thoughts of ordinary beings. Accelerated cultivation required something called soul-guiding incense, made from burning camphor wood as a carrier.
Double happiness gave him 2 jade slips of the first scroll.
Soyu set the first jade slip against his forehead, followed Insight's instructions for activation, and dropped into his first cultivation session right there in the living room.
The mental power he had been carrying around without knowing suddenly came alive under focused attention, the scroll guiding him through the initial forms with the same efficient clarity as the cultivation manuals he had read for fun in his previous life.
He lost track of time completely.
Night fell, passed, and the sky brightened again, while he sat still on the floor of the villa.
When he finally surfaced from the session, the system was pinging him to claim his 5-day ranking chest. His base mental attribute had reached 10 on its own merit without potions, and he had acquired a new active skill, hypnosis, capable of consuming mental power to subconsciously guide the thoughts of ordinary creatures.
His combat power had crossed from ordinary tier into Black Iron 0 rank. He updated his panel, claimed the 5-day chest, a 30 square meter island area fragment, doubled to 2 by double happiness, and activated both fragments immediately. 766 square meters, nearly a 28 by 28 box. Then his stomach made its opinion known, and Soyu went to find the 2 intelligent household robots he had fished up and told number 2 to cook something proper. While the food materialized in the kitchen with a level of culinary precision that no goblin or skeleton could have managed, Soyu pulled out a notebook and drew a rough diagram. 4 categories of survivors: ordinary people, sharply talented individuals, high-end talent holders, and the low martial world arrivals.
For each one, a different approach: convert, trade, or eliminate, depending on what Insight could tell him about the specific person before he made contact.
The subduing of Ocean had proven that a single loyalty potion plus a blade at the right moment was enough to turn an enemy into a worker who showed up on time and weeded the garden with genuine enthusiasm. Scale that formula, and the island's labor needs became a solved problem.
He ate the meal number 2 had laid out, burped with complete satisfaction, and walked back to the edge with a black iron fishing rod he had assembled the night before from profound iron, ice silkworm silk, and a black iron profound hook.
The rod was a different instrument entirely from the ordinary one. 200 durability, capable of fishing black iron grade chests up to 3 stars, with a hook and line sharp enough to function as a weapon in a pinch. He had tested that last part inside the cabin by accident, embedding the hook in the cabin wall while flicking the rod casually. He had needed a knife to cut the wood open to get it back out.
Now, standing at the water's edge with insight, reading chest positions and clean three-dimensional detail across the seafloor, 1 stars here, 2 stars clustered there, a black iron-grade monster chest 10 meters down in a different direction, he understood why people in the communication channel had started referring to him as something other than a person. A 2-star black iron-grade chest had appeared in Insight's readout, and Soyu circled to the location, attached black iron-grade bait, adjusted the float, and cast. The ordinary wooden chests in the area scattered like minnows the moment the black iron bait hit the water, a repellent effect that was genuinely useful for keeping the zone clear.
An hour passed with the float perfectly still, and then it plunged with a force that nearly pulled the rod from both hands.
The readout arrived instantly. 2-star black iron-grade chest. Contents, a level 1 phantom array disc. Fishing skill, calling for short, quick yanks paired with slow releases. The phantom array disc was the simplest illusion array from an unspecified cultivation world, the kind low-level cultivators use to hide their cave entrances from ordinary mortals. It consumed 1 ordinary energy crystal every 2 days at maximum coverage of 1,000 square meters, and anyone with a mental attribute below 10 would walk past whatever it concealed and see only empty sea.
Anyone above 10 would see through it.
Soyu, whose mental attribute now sat at 10, noted that particular detail with the specific attention it deserved.
He worked the black iron chest ashore after 30 minutes of fighting it, opened it, and double happiness produced 2 phantom array discs.
He took one back to the villa, slotted an ordinary energy crystal into the hole at the center, felt the disc wake under his palm, set the coverage radius wide, and watched his entire island vanish from observable reality.
At the water's edge, Yo-Yo and Yo-Yi surfaced from their patrol route and swam straight into the foundation stones of the invisible island with matching heavy thuds.
Soyu watched this from above, added them manually to the array's exemption list so they stopped headbutting his own island, and moved on.
The invisibility array meant that anyone approaching his location from the outside would see open water. The strategic value of that, given everything the next phase of the survival game was likely to involve, was difficult to overstate.
He called Jael and Golil over, briefed them on the patrol mission, sweep nearby waters for uninhabited islands, bring back hearts, report before engaging anything inhabited, and sent the speedboat out with the great sword skeletons aboard and the 2 mermaid guards running escort underwater.
Then he went back to fishing. Insight lit up a 5-star pet chest almost immediately. Contents flagged as a jade claw sea eagle with an unactivated divine bird bloodline and a flame frog bloodline at Tier 1 as its awakening path.
A trial was required, deterrence, which meant if he could not intimidate the bird sufficiently upon release, it would not accept him as master.
Soyu called the goblins to build a cage, placed the chest inside once the cage was ready, ring the cage with every bandage mummy and greatsword skeleton not currently on patrol, drew his saber, laid the flat of it on the cage bars, and told every undead being around him to look as threatening as they were capable of looking.
Then he opened the chest.
The jade claw sea eagle materialized inside the cage with one sharp, proud cry, and then felt every pair of eyes in the vicinity lock onto it with the combined menace of a creature, deciding which direction was least likely to get it killed.
In the span of about 2 heartbeats, the bird did the math and lowered its head to Soyu, in acceptance.
The chime confirmed the trial passed, and double happiness immediately filled the cage with a second identical sea eagle.
Both birds launched into the air the moment the cage was lifted, circled the island once with the proprietary confidence of creatures who had decided this was their territory too, and then glided down to perch on his extended arm.
Sharp claws, he told them with something close to fondness, and handed them strips of raw beef.
He sent them out to scout the nearby sea and watched them shrink into specks above the waterline. The speedboat returned while he was still working the rod, and Jael's report from the bow confirmed 2 adjacent islands spotted southeast, one uninhabited and one with 2 humans on it, a man who looked ordinary and a woman who radiated a danger that Jael's instinct had declined to test.
The description matched Ocean's communication channel posts about the old nun almost perfectly.
Soyu had already looked Ocean up, already confirmed the man's situation, and already opened a private channel with him.
The rest of the operation had gone as planned. One ordinary pistol traded through the system, one desperate man waiting for the right moment, and 8 rounds at close range doing the rest.
By the time Soyu arrived at the island, the old nun was dead, and Ocean was on his knees in the dirt, with the skeleton captain holding his pistol and looking significantly less patient than a man in that position wanted to see.
2 island hearts, 1 converted prisoner, 1 special chest with a cultivation method inside, and no losses on his side.
The day had been efficient.
On the island, now more than twice the size it had been when the story started, the bandage mummies and greatsword skeletons stood guard around the villa in neat rotations. The mermaid guards ran crab-mounted patrols in the water below. The jade claw eagles traced wide arcs overhead. And somewhere in the villa kitchen, robot number 2 was preparing dinner without being asked.
Soyu stood at the edge of the island and looked at all of it, and felt the particular satisfaction of a man whose plan is ahead of schedule.
The pincer crabs had arrived 2 days into the new phase of island development, pulled from a 1-star black iron grade monster chest that had appeared in the seafloor readout after his base mental attribute clear 10.
The chest had required a taming trial rather than a combat trial, and without the Soul Scripture's hypnosis ability, a creature with Strength 10 and Constitution 10 and pincers that could snap ordinary iron rebar like dry noodles would have been a substantially different problem.
Soyu had channeled the Soul Scripture, pushed a wave of mental suggestion into the crab's dim consciousness. Home, safety, family, the bipedal creature in front of you, and held it for 10 full minutes while his forehead went damp.
When the session ended, 2 first-order pincer crabs were imprinted on him like he was the warmest rock in the ocean. He had tested one of them on a broadsword from a 2-star chest, told it to clamp the blade, and watched the broadsword shatter with a crack.
Then he assigned them to underwater patrol alongside the mermaid guards, producing a cavalry unit of mermaids mounted on crabs, which was an image he chose not to think about too carefully.
Sea monkeys were arriving in groups now, 5 at a time where there used to be 1, and the crabs handled them with the same efficiency they had demonstrated on iron rebar.
The synchronized pincer strike was fast and final, and the bodies went to feed the carnivorous plants, which were approaching a mutation point after weeks of a consistent sea monkey diet.
Soyu had begun to develop a theory about the sea monster spawn rate scaling with island level, and the data kept supporting it. More area, more monsters, bigger groups.
He would keep killing them and let the carnivorous plants handle the rest.
The Galil situation was developing on its own timeline.
The great sword skeleton captain had been absorbing soul power from every kill Soyu directed him toward, and the accumulated effect over the preceding days was visible in the color of his bones, shifting from white to black iron, and in the green tint creeping into the white soul fire of his skull.
His base strength had reached 11, Constitution 11, Spirit 9, and the panel told Soyu that Galilil was approaching an advancement threshold.
What waited on the other side of that threshold was a silver-grade skeleton general, which was the kind of notation that made Soyu file feeding priority for Galil as a line item.
The ordinary troop altar had been the most unexpectedly useful chest drop of the previous week.
2 simple stone altars, about 1 meter wide, each capable of accepting 10 ordinary energy crystals, with a 5-character phrase determining the general direction of the summoned troops, with the altar scrapping itself after 1 use.
He had spent the first altar on 10 greatsword skeletons, and one of the 10 had rolled an exceptional potential panel: Strength 7, Constitution 6, Spirit 4, Skill, Chaotic Cloak Swordplay, with the highest advancement potential of any greatsword skeleton in the group, pointing towards silver grade.
That one became Galil's promotion target.
The second altar had summoned 10 bandage mummies, the lowest tier of the corpse race. No individual standout among them, but they were 100% under his control, ate nothing, drank nothing, slept nowhere, and did not use the toilet.
As island inhabitants go, bandage mummies were nearly ideal.
The communication channel in this period had developed several distinct factions, visible to anyone who read it long enough.
The majority were still struggling for daily survival and venting at the system and each other in roughly equal measure.
A smaller group had figured out that the top 10 prosperity ranking was the threshold between having options and not having them, and were grinding with purpose toward it. The smallest group, which included Wang Dong and Gei Chong-yu and Zhou Yil, had quietly concluded that staying in Soyu's orbit was better than the alternative.
Wang Dong was in the top 10 now, his bait formula advantage compounding daily.
Gei Chong-yu had upgraded her rod, was fishing 5-star chests with enhanced bait, and had stopped asking questions she already knew the answers to.
Zhou Yil, who had held second place from the early days, using a divination talent to time his casts, watched Soyu's prosperity gap and said less with every passing day.
And then, Li Zheng had taken the energy crystal formula that Wang Dong had sold him and broadcast it publicly to build a reputation he intended to monetize, which had cost Wang Dong a training partner he valued, and produced in Wang Dong a specific kind of fury that he had no effective outlet for.
So you had watched the whole arc from a slight distance and found it predictable and uninteresting.
He had given Wang Dong the formula in the first place because the region developing was in his interest, and anyone who turned around and leveraged it for social capital was simply running their own strategy, the same as everyone else.
The channel's resentment toward him specifically continued to be a consistent background note, the kind of noise that came from people who saw the gap between first place and their own position and needed somewhere to put the feeling. He had made his peace with that particular dynamic on day one.
The phantom array disk had made it easier. With his island invisible to anyone approaching from outside who had a mental attribute below 10, the number of unexpected visitors had dropped to 0, and the ones who might theoretically have the mental attribute to pierce it were the same tier of survivor who would identify themselves by other means long before they reached his perimeter.
The world kept throwing new variables into the calculation. The low martial arts world arrivals had integrated into the regional ecosystem in uneven ways, most of them confused and outnumbered, and eventually brought to some working arrangement with Water Blue Star survivors through food or force, or a combination of both.
The more dangerous ones, like Noon Boltai had targets on them from the moment they made enough noise in the channel. So you had begun to treat information about powerful new arrivals the same way he treated information about 5-star chests. Gather it first, plan, act second. The regret about Yupio, about not keeping him alive long enough to ask useful questions, had sharpened him on that point.
The 5-day ranking chest's pattern of increasing fragment rewards by 10 square meters per interval was beginning to look like a reliable curve, and Soyu was already planning what the 7-day chest would add.
The island at 766 square meters was about 27.7 meters on each side, just shy of the level 4 upgrade threshold at 800.
2 or 3 more finds and the level would flip.
While he worked the rod along the morning perimeter of the 8th day, the system pinged him with a new special chest readout before the float had even twitched.
5-star ordinary wooden chest, 5 meters down. Contents flagged as a smart navigation map to a deserted small island northwest of his position.
He fished it up, took the palm-sized navigation object from the chest, and handed the mermaid guards their next task, before the double happiness copy of the same map had even settled in his palm.
While they were en route, he kept the rod moving, and insight delivered something he had been waiting for since the black iron grade bait first appeared in his inventory.
A 1-star black iron grade ordinary wooden chest, 8 meters down, containing a black iron grade fishing rod upgrade blueprint along with other materials he already held.
He attached black iron bait, cast, and worked the chest end with the patience of a man who had nothing to hurry toward.
On the return trip, the mermaid guards surfaced with the island heart from the deserted island northwest, a level 1 heart with an original area of 105 square meters, retrieved cleanly and brought back without incident.
The integration expanded his island to 871 square meters, and the system chimed level 3 Island Lord, prosperity plus 1,000, and a special upgrade chest.
The Level 3 upgrade chest contained a Tier 1 spirit gathering pill, the second confirmed pill in the cultivation novel series the system appeared to be slowly curating for him.
Double happiness gave him two.
He took the first and felt a cool, refreshing wave sweep through his brain, comparable to iced cola in peak summer, but arriving behind the eyes, and let it run for a full hour without interrupting it.
The second pill lasted half as long as the note had promised, and when the combined effect faded, his spirit attribute had climbed to 8 8/10.
He brought up the panel in full.
Level 3 Island Lord, 871 square meters. All three base attributes now sitting above 8, with the island bonus pushing them past 12 in effective terms. Combat power reading ordinary 8th rank outside, and black iron 1st rank within the island radius. Island prosperity at 2,250, still holding first place by a margin that had stopped feeling competitive and started feeling geological.
The channel, upon noticing his prosperity jump from the island upgrade, briefly achieved something close to unified silence. Then it went back to the usual noise, but quieter, as if a portion of the people who had been calculating whether first place was eventually catchable had quietly updated their estimate. The carnivorous plants bloomed that afternoon. Soyu noticed it on his evening perimeter walk, the east plant slightly ahead of the west, its roots having processed more sea monkey corpses under the accelerant compound. The system notification confirmed that the plant had reached full maturity, that its root system could now kill ordinary humans easily, and that further feeding of monster corpses would allow continued mutation toward a higher plant tier. He told the goblins to keep redirecting sea monkey bodies to the roots and filed the information. The thought that had been forming in the back of his mind since the cultivation manual arrived was beginning to take a more concrete shape. The chests he had been fishing, the altars, the phantom disc, the robots, the cultivation scroll, the carnivorous plant seeds, accelerated by a compound that used ordinary energy crystals as its primary ingredient, were drawing from too many different worlds, too many incompatible systems of reality to be explained by any single origin. His working theory was that the sea itself was a kind of terminal point where destroyed worlds drained, their material contents stripped from context and redistributed in chests for survivors who had been dragged out of those same dying worlds to fish up and use. He could not confirm it, and he did not try. Speculation beyond what insight could verify was a distraction, and he had a full plate of verified problems to manage.
The low martial arts world arrivals were settling into the ecosystem with varying degrees of friction, and the ones who had reached Soyu's channel filter were already people he had assessed or handled.
The ones he had not yet encountered were a statistical certainty rather than a question. He made a note in the notebook to run a channel search every morning for names that appeared in distress messages, cross-referenced against combat reports, to identify which arrivals were dangerous before they had a chance to become problems at scale. The soul scripture cultivation sessions continued daily, each one running for hours while the island's activity went on around him, the 4 goblins and Ocean handling the groundwork, the undead providing passive security, the mermaid crab cavalry handling the water, and the eagles handling the air. His mental attribute climbed with each session, and with it, the hypnosis ability grew longer in range and lighter in cost, and the granularity of insight kept refining. He was now reading not just star ratings and contents, but the movement patterns of chests in the water, where they clustered, where they drifted, and which stretches were restocking from a depleted state and which ones were still full. It was information that would have taken an ordinary survivor days of blind casting to approximate, and he was reading it in real time on a single standing scan. The 7-day ranking chest arrived the following morning, and its contents confirmed the pattern. A 40-square-meter island area fragment, doubled to 2 by double happiness, adding 80 square meters to the total. The island crossed 950 square meters, close enough to the level 4 threshold that one more uninhabited island heart would push it over. He sent the mermaid guards on a wider patrol arc, instructed the eagles to scout further than they had previously gone, and waited. The eagles came back first, tilting their heads at him and nodding when he asked if they had found something. 2 adjacent small islands,
one uninhabited, about 4 nautical miles southeast.
The mermaid guards confirmed it on their return 20 minutes later.
He boarded the speedboat, pulled the navigation map, and headed out.
On the way back, the island heart from the deserted island in the pocket of his cold-proof suit, his thoughts ran ahead to what the Level 4 upgrade would produce.
Level 2 had given him the marrow cleansing pill. Level 3 had given him the spirit gathering pill. Level 4, if the pattern held, would give him something in the same tier or higher, and whatever it was, double happiness would double it.
He integrated the heart the moment he stepped back on the island, and the system's congratulations were already scrolling before the integration animation had finished. First in the area to achieve Level 4 Island Lord status. Prosperity plus 2,000, special upgrade chest reward.
He claimed it without theatrics.
The Level 4 upgrade chest contained a Tier 2 strength consolidation pellet, described as a method for consolidating all physical attribute gains to date into a stable foundation, with refining materials drawn from several lists that had begun to look more like the ingredients section of a major cultivation story than anything he expected to fish up on a small island in the middle of the sea.
Double happiness gave him 2.
He took the first, felt his body go quiet in a way that was different from every potion and pill he had consumed before. Not a rush, not a shock, but a settling, like sand finding its final position at the bottom of a jar, and sat with it for the full 2 hours the effect required.
When it cleared, the panel read differently. Not the numbers, which had moved by amounts consistent with what he had consumed, but the quality line at the bottom. Where there had been calculated combat ratings and equipment-dependent tiers, there was now a new notation, Foundation Solidified, indicating that every stat gain to this point had been permanently anchored into his base constitution rather than floating above it.
The second pill produced the same settlement sensation, but shorter and lighter, as the series always did.
He filed both results and checked the island. 1,200 square meters now. A full 40 by 30 perimeter, more than 10 times the size of the bare rock where the story had started.
Galil had advanced.
The soul power from the last batch of sea monkey corpses had pushed the skeleton captain across the advancement threshold, and the change was visible in a way that no panel number could have conveyed.
His bones were no longer chalk white with black iron patches, but a uniform deep iron color with a faint metallic sheen, and the soul fire in his skull had shifted fully from white to green.
The panel listed him as a black iron grade elite great sword skeleton, strength 15, constitution 14, spirit 12, with the advancement path now pointing towards silver grade and a specific next requirement, 5 green soul fires, which could only be obtained from black iron grade monster kills.
So you looked at the advancement note, looked at the fact that sea monsters appeared to be scaling with his island level, and estimated that the 5 green soul fires were probably a few weeks away if the spawn rate kept rising. He told Galil to keep doing what he had been doing and put the calculation down. The communication channel on the night of the 7th day, with the novice protection period technically ending the following morning, had a texture to it that was different from anything Soyu had read in it before. Not louder, not quieter, but more deliberate, as if the portion of channel population that intended to survive the next phase was making notes, and the portion that had accepted they would not had gone quiet. He scrolled for useful information and found 3 significant threads.
The first was a confirmed report of a 3-star black iron grade monster chest sighting by Joe Yeel, who had acquired black iron bait and was reporting the fishing experience in careful detail.
The second was Gay Chong Yu, describing a successful hypnosis taming of a first-order creature she had not expected to be able to tame, which told Soyu she had found a cultivation method of her own.
The third was Wong Dong, reporting that his servant Gap had finally stabilized at 90 loyalty after a week of consistent feeding and positive reinforcement, and asking the channel whether anyone had experience with advancing human servants.
Soyu answered the last one. Loyalty-boosting potions past the 80 threshold showed diminishing returns. The most reliable path above 90 was sustained positive engagement over time.
He sent the message as a pin because he still had daily pins available, and his leaderboard standing still made his posts the most visible thing in the channel.
The channel thinking.
He did not read the thanks.
On the morning when the protection period ended, the sea looked the same as it always had. The water was flat and cold and gray at that hour, and nothing on the surface indicated that the rules had changed.
But Insight was reading differently. The sea monkey spawns that had been appearing in groups of 5 were now flagging as groups of 8, and the warning radius of the special device mounted on the villa's upper floor had started pinging in patterns it had never produced during the protected week. Multiple heat signatures from different compass directions, some of them too large for sea monkeys. Soyu stood at the edge with the black iron rod in hand, read the Insight output across the seafloor, and began to understand that what the protection period had been suppressing was not just sea monkeys and the occasional damaged chest washing up in a rain.
It had been suppressing the sea. He did not panic.
He had spent the entire protection period building exactly for this moment. And the island that stood behind him, 1,200 square meters, a 2-story villa, 4 goblins, a robot kitchen staff, a cultivated mind, 2 tamed jade eagles, 2 mermaid guards on 2 pincer crabs, 10 greatsword skeletons, 10 bandage mummies, 2 carnivorous plants approaching a second mutation, and an invisibility array covering all of it, was as prepared as a man could make a 100-square-meter rock in 7 days.
He walked back inside, ate the breakfast number 2 had prepared, drank an entire bottle of Sprite, and let the carbonation clear his head.
The first real test arrived within the hour. 8 sea monkeys surfaced simultaneously on the eastern perimeter, which was the new normal for spawn size, and the crab-mounted mermaid guard on that side met them before any of them cleared the waterline.
What followed was not a fight in any meaningful sense of the word.
The 2 pincer crabs swept through the group with synchronized strikes, and the 8 sea monkeys went from problem to fertilizer in under 2 minutes.
The bodies went to the carnivorous plants. So you watched the alert resolve on the warning device, marked the time and the count in the notebook, and cast the rod.
The second alert came 40 minutes later, west perimeter. 6 creatures this time, but flagged by Insight as a different shape from sea monkeys, broader at the shoulder, lower in the water, moving in a formation that looked less like opportunistic scavenging and more like coordinated approach.
He called Galel and the Great Sword Skeleton Squad to the west edge and watched from the perimeter while the Black Iron Elite Skeleton and his unit intercepted the group in the water with the mermaid guards flanking.
The creatures were a type he had not encountered before, heavier than sea monkeys and equipped with rudimentary clubs that they wielded with purpose rather than instinct.
The clubs were ineffective against the skeleton squad, which was biologically indifferent to blunt trauma, and the flanking pincer crabs finished what the skeletons started.
Soyu noted the new creature type in the notebook, asked Insight for a readout on the bodies, and found they carried a very small quantity of black iron-grade material inside their shells, something the system categorized as crude black iron ore, usable in basic black iron crafting.
He had the goblins collected, added the data to his notebook, and kept fishing.
The third event of the first post-protection morning came from above rather than the water.
The Jade Claw Sea Eagles, on their standard morning patrol arc, returned both at once, which they never did unless something required it, and landed on his shoulder in a way that communicated urgency in the language of birds, which he was getting better at reading.
He asked them if they had found something larger than the usual.
Both birds nodded.
He asked if it was closer than 3 nautical miles.
The right bird tilted its head to indicate about 2.
He asked if it was moving toward the island.
Both birds sat very still for a moment. Then the left one gave one slow nod.
Soyu set down the rod, walked to the villa, put on the cold-proof suit, picked up the 100 refined goose feather saber, and took a full inventory of what was positioned where.
Galil and the skeleton squad, fresh from the western engagement, were reforming on the north side.
The bandage mummy unit was stationed around the villa's base.
The mermaid guards and crabs were in the water to the south and east.
The carnivorous plants on the east and west villa walls had been flagged as ready to entangle any creature that passed within 4 meters of their root systems.
The 4 goblins were armed with pistols and had practiced daily.
The invisible array was active.
From outside, what the approaching threat would see was open water.
He told every unit to hold their position and wait for his signal. Check the warning device and watch the readout change.
The approaching signature was too large for a sea monkey.
Too organized for a wave of ordinary creatures. Insight flagged it as a black iron-grade monster entity, category undetermined, distance 2 nautical miles, and closing at a pace that suggested it was following something, a scent, a heat trace, or something in the water that pointed in his direction. He wondered if it could detect the ordinary energy crystals he had been using in such volume that the sea around his island probably smelled like a quarry.
He filed the thought, watched the distance counter tick down, and waited.
At 500 meters, the insight readout solidified. The entity was a black iron-gray sea creature called a deep iron tide serpent, 8 meters from snout to tail, constitution 18, strength 16, spirit 6, skill iron scale torrent that let it channel water pressure into a directional strike at short range.
Combat power, Black Iron 2nd rank. His own on-island combat power was currently Black Iron 1st rank, a gap that was not catastrophic if he used the terrain correctly, but not one he wanted to test in open water.
He was going to need the crabs. He called the signal down to the water. Yo-Yo, Yo-Yi, the tide serpent, at 400 meters south. Intercept with the crabs and delay it. Do not engage solo.
The confirmation came back in the form of 2 splashes and a visible acceleration in the crab silhouettes below the surface. From the edge of the island, Soyu watched the underwater engagement develop through Insight's readout, like a map updating in real time.
The 2 mermaid crab pairs cut southeast at their best underwater speed, close to intercept range, and one of the crabs led with a pincer strike the moment the serpent came within reach. The serpent absorbed the strike and retaliated with the iron scale torrent, and the readout showed the impacted crab's constitution dropping by 4 points in one exchange.
That was the signal he had been waiting for.
He pulled the phantom array offline for 10 seconds, which was enough to make the island visible, and as the serpent's attention oriented to the new stimulus, Soyu jumped onto the waiting speedboat and sent it straight south at maximum throttle.
The strategy was the same one that had worked on the sea monkeys. Lure the target to a controlled surface engagement, where his strength and the terrain advantage canceled the raw constitution gap.
The serpent tracked the boat's noise and surfaced 50 meters out, and the moment its head cleared the water, Insight gave him the targeting data he needed.
Top of the skull, directly between the eyes, where the iron scale coverage was thinnest. He held the saber in both hands, waited for the serpent's strike arc to commit, and cut. The first blow landed clean on the weak point. The serpent's constitution was 18, and the blow did not kill, but the precise strike to the head disrupted its iron scale torrent charge, and in the 2 seconds it took the serpent to recover its focus, the crabs arrived from below.
2 pincer strikes to the body simultaneously, each one shearing through the iron scale armor at the joints, where Insight had indicated the plating was thin.
The serpent managed one partial torrent discharge that rocked the speedboat and sent Soyu off balance for 1 full step before the follow-up strikes from Galil, who had jumped from the island's edge into the water, finished the engagement.
The tide serpent sank, and the sea went still.
Soyu stood on the speedboat with a small cut along his forearm from the torrent's edge effect, shook the water off the saber, and noted in the part of his mind that kept the running accounting that he had just killed a Black Iron 2nd rank entity with a Black Iron 1st rank combat power through terrain use and unit coordination.
The gap was bridgeable.
He filed that too, then told Galil to collect the serpent body before it sank and bring it to the carnivorous plants.
On the boat back to the island, holding pressure against the forearm cut, he ran the morning through the calculation.
6 sea monkeys in one wave, a new heavy shoulder creature type, and a Black Iron 2nd rank serpent, all in the first 4 hours after the protection period ended.
The spawn rate and tier ceiling were both higher than the protection period had suggested, and they were probably going to keep scaling.
The island's current defensive setup had handled the morning, but the margin was tighter than he liked. He needed the black iron grade fishing rod upgrade before anything else, which meant acquiring 200 units of refined profound iron and 2 black iron profound hooks, neither of which had come up in the last few days of fishing.
He also needed black iron grade bait in volume, and the enhanced bait supply was running low again.
Back on the island, Number 2 had a meal on the table by the time he walked through the villa door, and he ate it standing while reading his panel updates. Island prosperity had crossed 3,500, a number that had stopped producing reactions in him some time ago.
The leaderboard gap between his position and second place was the kind of number that people in the channel described as the gap between a civilization and its ruins, and he was still widening it.
He finished eating, changed the cold-proof suit for the soft thorn armor, and spent the afternoon working the rod.
The afternoon produced, in order, 3 5-star ordinary wooden chests with contents he had already cataloged, 1 2-star black iron grade ordinary wooden chest with 2 black iron profound hooks inside, and a 2-star black iron grade monster chest with a creature insight flagged as a deep-sea iron mantis shrimp, Tier 1 black iron, Strength 12, Constitution 10, Spirit 4, Skill Precision Strike, capable of accelerating one limb to a speed that ordinary iron could not absorb cleanly.
He went through the taming trial for the mantis shrimp the same way he had handled the pincer crabs: soul scripture, 10 minutes, mental suggestion, and double happiness produced 2 of them.
They were smaller than the crabs, faster, and significantly more precise, and Soyu assigned them to the speedboat as mounted escort for any time he left the island perimeter.
By the time the sun was dropping, he had also pulled 200 units of refined profound iron from 3 separate 5-star chests across the afternoon.
All the upgrade materials for the next tier rod were in it.
He sat in the villa with the black iron rod on the table in front of him, the materials arranged beside it, and the upgrade blueprint open in his hand.
The system asked whether he wanted to use the advanced fishing rod upgrade blueprint with the 200 refined profined iron, 200-year ice silkworm silk, and 2 black iron profined hooks to upgrade the current rod to the next tier.
He confirmed. The materials dissolved into the rod in a cascade of white and black light, and 4 minutes later, a rod of a deeper, darker color sat in front of him. The advanced black iron grade fishing rod, capable of fishing black iron grade chests up to 5 stars, with a note that the hook and line were now sharp enough to qualify as a melee weapon at close range. He put it down carefully. The memory of the last rod's hook embedding itself in the cabin wall was recent enough to make him cautious in enclosed spaces.
The evening patrol came back clean.
The sea, after the engagement with the tide serpent, seemed to have recalibrated in whatever the sea did between threat arrivals.
Soyu cultivated for 3 hours, added the day's entries to the notebook, and went to sleep on the Simmons mattress with a distant, satisfied feeling of someone who had been kept very busy and had not wasted any of it.
The 10th day after transmigration began with the 5-star black iron grade chest, Insight had been reading at 9 meters down for 2 days, finally moving within cast range of the advanced rod.
He had been waiting for it to drift close enough to hook cleanly, and when the readout confirmed it was in position, he baited up with black iron grade bait, cast, and settled into the chair. The float did not move for an hour and 20 minutes, which was the longest he had waited for any chest at any tier, and when it finally plunged, the pull on the rod was unlike anything he had felt since the tide serpent engagement. He spent 40 minutes on the landing, using the full range of the advanced rod's capability, and when the 5-star black iron grade chest finally came ashore, it was heavy enough that even his upgraded physical stats registered the weight as notable.
Inside, a black iron grade array formation disc, the second-tier version of the Phantom Array, capable of concealing up to 10,000 square meters from any observer with a mental attribute below 20, consuming 1 low-grade energy stone every 3 days.
His current Phantom disc concealed everything from mental attributes below 10.
This one concealed everything from mental attributes below 20.
The tactical gap between those two thresholds was considerable, and Double Happiness put 2 of the discs in his hands. He installed the upgraded disc immediately, retired the original, and watched the island vanish under a more complete cover than anything it had had before.
Then he checked the remaining chest contents.
Also inside, a black iron grade cultivation supplement called the Bone Forging Liquid, a bottle of dark metallic fluid that, when consumed, would permanently anchor the body's current physical attribute ceiling at black iron grade, preventing regression even if island bonuses were removed. He had always understood that his island bonus attributes were conditional. They vanished the moment he stepped off the island, but he had not previously found a method for making those gains permanent.
This was the method.
He held the bottle for a long moment, reading the fine print, then opened it.
The smell was like metal after rain, and the taste was the same thing the smell had promised.
The effect was not dramatic. No shock, no sweep, no trembling. Just a slow, molecular-level tightening across every bone in his body over the course of about an hour, as if each one were being fitted with a lining that would not give.
When it was done, he checked the panel. The island bonus still showed as a separate column, but the base attributes had a new notation beside them, anchored, meaning the gains he had consolidated were no longer conditional on standing in a particular location. He was, for the first time since arriving on the bare rock, a version of himself that existed without asterisks.
He marked the day in the notebook with a line that read simply, "Floor raised." Orkian, who had been working on the island for 3 days at this point, had settled into a functional rhythm that Soyu found more useful than he had initially expected.
The man's frank, rapid speed talent made him the fastest person on the island for ground-level tasks, and his instinct for spotting things out of place, a holdover from however long he had survived before Noonbowl Tai arrived, had flagged 2 chest wash-ups that the goblins would have missed. His loyalty sat at a stable 92 and had not budged in either direction for 48 hours, which was about as settled as a man could get without being born into servitude. Soyu had assigned him to the speedboat maintenance rotation and to daily perimeter checks, which played to his speed and his instinct for reading the water, and the assignment was working. He would probably never be Galil, but he was not trying to be, and that was fine. The communication channel on day 10 was quieter than it had been since the first day, which Soyu recognized as a specific kind of quiet, the kind that follows a severe first night outside the protection period. Survivors who had not prepared adequately for what waited past the 7-day mark had encountered it the previous evening, and the channel was thinner because some of those survivors were no longer posting. He did not read into the silence too deeply. Every person in the channel had received the same system information, the same weekly reset of daily bait, the same base protection period to build in. What each person built with that time was the result of choices, and the results were the results.
He checked the living roster of his island, updated the notebook, and fished.
The afternoon brought a chest drop that stopped his hand on the rod for a full 5 seconds before he resumed reeling.
A 3-star black iron grade ordinary wooden chest, 10 meters down, contents flagged as a low-grade energy stone, the first-tier material above ordinary energy crystals, which was the base resource for black iron grade bait production.
He had been without a path to a self-sufficient black iron bait production since the original 4 portions had run out, relying on trade for scraps and occasional 5-star chest fragments to supplement.
1 low-grade energy stone, doubled to 2 by Double Happiness, plus the black iron-grade chest fragment the system generated automatically from the chest he had just opened, gave him the materials to craft 10 portions of black iron bait.
He did not let himself celebrate loudly. He just baited the rod with the new stock the moment it was crafted and cast for the next chest. The evening fishing session, run on black iron bait with the advanced rod, produced in 3 hours what had previously taken a full day with enhanced bait and an ordinary rod. The quality ceiling had moved, and with the quality ceiling moved, the rate at which the island could grow had moved with it. He sat in the massage chair watching the float and felt the shape of the next phase become clear. The protection period had been the tutorial. The first post-protection week had been the test of whether the tutorial had been used correctly. What came after was the actual game. And the actual game was a question about whether his lead, built from two broken talents, a sharp instinct for optimal play, and a willingness to kill without hesitating when hesitation would have cost him something irreplaceable, was large enough to compound rather than decay.
He believed it was. The evidence was in the notebook, and in the panel, and in the two jade hawks asleep on the villa rooftop, and in the two pincer crabs patrolling the dark water below his island in the middle of the night.
And in the skeleton captain who had absorbed enough soul power from enough kills to be approaching a silver advancement threshold.
And in the cultivation scroll that had given him a mental attack and a hypnosis ability he had not asked for and would not return.
He put the rod down, went inside, ate a steak that number 2 had been waiting to serve since before sundown, and opened the communication channel one last time before bed.
Wang Dong posted that his servant Gap had hit 95 loyalty, and that today he had personally cooked Gap a full meal with no complaint, adding that he still wished he had fished a girl.
Gay Chong-yu had posted a quiet note that she had upgraded her rod to the advanced tier and was looking for black iron grade bait materials, message directed at no one specific.
Zhou Yil had posted nothing.
Zhou Yil had been posting less and less since Soyu's prosperity had crossed 2,000, and Soyu read that silence the same way he read everything else, as information.
A man with a divination talent who went quiet when the gap became apparent was either planning or processing, and the question of which one would determine whether Zhou Yil eventually became useful or eventually became a problem.
He filed the question and closed the chair. The night passed without significant incident, which meant only that the incidents were small enough for the patrol units to handle without escalating to his level.
He slept through 3 sea monkey waves, one of the new heavy-shoulder creature appearances, and what the Goblin's morning report described as something that looked like a very large fish circling the island at about 100 meters, and then leaving.
He noted the large fish category and added it to the threat assessment column of the notebook. Unknown tier, unknown type, unknown intent.
Worth watching.
The 11th day was the day the Galil advancement finally triggered. Soyu was at the water's edge when the system notification arrived, telling him that his elite black iron greatsword skeleton had met the advancement conditions and asking whether to proceed.
He confirmed, and what happened next was worth stopping to watch.
Galil stood in the center of the island, while the green soul fire in his skull intensified over about 3 minutes, the color cycling from green to white to a blue-white that was genuinely uncomfortable to look at directly. His bones shed their black iron color and emerged on the other side of the transition as something lighter and denser simultaneously, the way refined metal looks different from raw ore, even at the same color tone. The panel updated. Silver grade skeleton general. Strength 19, Constitution 17, Spirit 15, Combat power Silver tier 0. Silver tier. Soyu looked at the number, and looked at the sea, and looked back at the number. Silver tier general on an island that started as 100 square meters of bare rock 11 days ago. The advancement also came with a new capability. Galil could now communicate, in the limited way that higher tier undead communicated, through projected intent rather than language, which meant Soyu could receive directional information from him without waiting for a goblin to relay a message. He put his hand on the newly silver skeleton's shoulder, said "well done" in the flattest voice he could manage, and went back to fishing.
The afternoon produced a 4-star black iron grade monster chest, which was the first time that tier had appeared in his fishing range, and the contents were a creature insight flagged as a first-order water spirit serpent, a different animal from the deep iron tide serpent, smaller, faster, spirit 6 as opposed to 3, with a water manipulation skill that made it significantly more dangerous in aquatic environments than its strength stats suggested.
The taming trial for the water spirit serpent was a combat trial rather than a deterrence or hypnosis trial, meaning he had to actually injure it into submission without killing it.
The soul scripture's hypnosis was not sufficient on its own for the task. The water spirit serpent's spirit attribute was too close to his own for clean mental dominance, So he had to use the saber to demonstrate a power disparity the creature's instinct could not argue with. He managed it in 12 minutes, and Double Happiness gave him 2 water spirit serpents, which he immediately sent to the underwater patrol rotation. Their water manipulation ability turned out to be useful in ways that the panel had not fully described. They could create localized current disruptions that masked the island's presence from creatures navigating by water pressure, which was an additional layer of concealment beyond the array disk.
He wrote down water spirit serpents, current disruption, concealment in the notebook, and kept fishing.
The communication channel on day 11 produced the most significant post Joe Yield had made in a week.
He announced that he had acquired a black iron grade bait formula, that he was looking to trade the information for a specific set of materials he listed, and that he would be private messaging the top 5 ranked survivors directly.
So you read the post, noted that the formula Joe Yield claimed to have was the same one he had been using for 2 days, and considered whether to respond.
The formula's value would depreciate as it spread, which was the natural arc of all early game information advantages.
What Joe Yield was doing by announcing it publicly was a move to trade the formula before it became common knowledge, which was rational and well-timed.
So you sent him a brief private message, acknowledging the formula was accurate, confirming he did not need the trade, and wishing him a productive negotiation.
It was the kind of message that costs nothing and banked something, which was the only category of message he had ever found worth sending.
Joe Yield replied after 2 hours with a short acknowledgement and one question. Was there anything Soyu was currently looking for that Joe Yield might be positioned to provide?
He answered honestly, silver-grade taming materials, specifically 5 green soul fires.
He did not explain what they were for.
He did not need to. Joe Yield went quiet again, and Soyu went back to the rod.
On the 12th day after transmigration, with the island standing at over 1,300 square meters under a 2-layer invisibility array, guarded by a silver-grade skeleton general and a roster of tamed black iron-grade sea creatures and undead and loyal goblin workers, Soyu stood at the edge and looked out at the sea.
The water did not look different than it had on the first day, when 100 square meter bare rock had seemed like the worst possible starting position.
It was the same flat, cold, gray expanse, full of things moving in the dark below the surface.
But he was different.
And the island behind him was proof of what different could build.
The question everyone in the regional channel had been asking since day 1, how is the top-ranked survivor doing it, had a simple answer that none of them could have fully appreciated without living it.
He had 2 talents that should not have coexisted in the same person, one that showed him precisely what was worth pursuing, and one that doubled every pursuit that paid off.
He had never wasted a cast on a stretch of water Insight said was empty, and he had never opened a chest without Double Happiness turning it into 2.
But talent was only the top layer.
Below the talent was the habit of thinking 2 moves ahead, of converting defeated enemies into servants before writing them off, of giving information to the channel when giving it cost nothing, and keeping it when keeping it cost nothing, of treating loyalty as a resource to be managed and not assumed.
Below that was something simpler. He had already died once, transmigrated into a world that had no mercy in it, and decided that surviving was not a position he was willing to negotiate on.
The sea would keep scaling. The monsters would keep coming. The low martial arts world arrivals would keep appearing on adjacent islands, with varying degrees of ambition and varying degrees of combat power.
The protection period was over, and the real game was running, and Soyu was as ready for it as a man could be, who had spent his first week turning 100 square meters of bare rock into a functioning civilization with an air force.
He picked up the advanced black iron fishing rod, attached a portion of the black iron bait he had crafted that morning, and cast toward the spot where Insight was reading a 5-star black iron grade chest sitting at 12 meters depth.
The float hung still on the surface.
The water was cold and flat and patient.
He was the same. While the float waited, Galil walked a slow circuit of the northern perimeter, his silver-white form catching the morning light in a way that made him less like a skeleton and more like a very efficient piece of architecture.
The 2 jade eagles were already airborne, circling at an altitude that let them see past the horizon in clear weather, and they had not given the alarm signal since the morning patrol had come back clean.
Yol and Yo-Yi were running the eastern underwater route on their crab mounts, the 2 water spirit serpents ahead of them disrupting the current signature the island put out.
The 4 goblins were harvesting from the fruit saplings that had grown to full production output, and the yield was going into cold storage in the villa's lower level, which number 1 had organized into a supply system that would have looked reasonable in a mid-sized convenience store.
Ocean was on the west edge doing a visual check of the waterline, moving with the quiet focus of a man who had internalized that his job was to notice things before they became problems.
The bandage mummies were stationed around the villa perimeter, still and patient in the way that creatures without biological time pressure can afford to be. The carnivorous plants, at their second mutation stage, had developed a passive motion detection ability that overlapped with the warning device's coverage zone, creating a redundant alert system with no dead spots.
Everything on the island was working, and everything working was the product of 12 days of decisions that had been made under the same simple framework: the best next move, then the next, then the next, without stopping to admire the view.
He had admired the view now, briefly, because the float had not moved and the morning was quiet, and the view was genuinely worth a moment.
Then the float plunged. He gripped the rod, checked the insight readout, and began to reel. 5-star black iron grade monster chest. Contents: 1 black iron gray sea creature, 2nd order, type undetermined until surfaced.
Trial type: subjugation. He called Galil over without looking up from the float.
He called 2 of the bandage mummies to flank the landing area. He kept the soul scripture active and passive, monitoring the mental landscape around the landing zone for the moment the creature's consciousness became readable.
He was ready.
The chest came up slowly under the combined pull of the advanced rod and his anchored physical foundation, the line cutting a clean V through the water as the weight rose.
A 2nd-order black iron grade entity was the highest tier creature he had attempted to subdue to date, and the taming threshold would be harder than the water spirit serpent had been.
But harder was the direction things were always supposed to move.
12 days ago, a 1-star common wood chest had felt like resistance. That was the reference point for how much the baseline had shifted.
The chest broke the surface, and the moment it did, the creature inside reacted to the change in pressure with a burst of energy that jerked the rod forward and pulled Soyu 2 full steps toward the water before he anchored.
He held. Galil moved into position.
The bandage mummies tightened their flanking positions.
He touched the chest with one hand while keeping the rod's tension with the other and willed it open.
What emerged from the white light was a creature that Insight identified as a black iron-grade armored deep shark, 3 meters, constitution 22, strength 20, spirit 7, scales rated above ordinary iron in resistance, with a ramming skill that could build speed in the water to generate impact forces beyond what the constitution number alone suggested.
It landed on the island's edge, disoriented, and its survival instinct looked left and right, and found Galil's silver soul fire on one side, 2 mummies with white bandages and full alertness on the other, and a biped in front of it radiating a specific mental pressure that it had never encountered before and could not categorize.
Soyu channeled the soul scripture to its maximum current output, pushing a sustained wave of hypnotic pressure at the shark's consciousness, not trying for instant control, but for progressive saturation. Every instinct the creature had toward aggression finding a wall, every opening for compliance finding reinforced ground.
15 minutes passed.
His forehead was damp, and his spirit attribute was dropping at a rate that would become a problem in another 20 minutes.
He pushed harder.
The shark, which had been cycling between panic and aggression, went still.
Then it lowered the front of its body in what Insight read as a submission posture. The system chimed.
Taming successful.
Double happiness triggered.
2 black iron-gray armored deep sharks now occupied the landing zone, both of them oriented toward Soyu, with the specific animal focus of creatures that had just decided this person was the axis their world turned on.
He let out a long breath,
wiped his forehead, and looked at the two enormous sharks sitting on his island edge like enormous guard dogs waiting for someone to throw them a stick.
He fed them the sea serpent meat that was already in the storage rotation, scratched the base of the nearest one's dorsal fin with one careful hand, and felt the creature's satisfaction as a low resonance through his palm.
So you told them their job was the deep water perimeter, anything below 20 meters that the mermaid guards could not safely intercept, and watched them process the instruction with the dim but genuine comprehension of a creature that had been hypnotized into treating his voice as the same category of authority as gravity. They entered the water together with a sound like two large doors closing, and the sea closed over them without disturbing the surface more than a moment.
He picked up the rod again.
There was still daylight light. The insight readout was already showing another dense cluster of black iron-grade chests 200 meters south, and he was out of a reason not to fish them. He baited the rod, cast, and began to calculate.
The Level 5 island upgrade threshold was at 2,000 square meters, which meant he needed roughly 700 more square meters, which at current heart acquisition rates was approximately 4 to 6 deserted islands, depending on their base area.
The mermaid guards and the eagles had identified 3 candidates within a 5 nautical mile radius over the last 2 days. 2 of them confirmed uninhabited, and 1 of unknown status.
The 3 uninhabited hearts would get him to approximately 1,600, and then the question of the third island and whether it was inhabited by someone he should convert or someone he should eliminate would determine whether he needed to find additional candidates.
He noted the plan in the notebook. The float moved.
He reeled with the steady, practiced ease of someone who had done this enough times that the physical mechanics had become completely automatic, leaving the rest of his attention available for everything else.
The evening patrol report from Galil arrived as a projected directional sense rather than words. North clear, east minor activity resolved, south deep water clear, west 1 contact at 400 meters retreating.
He acknowledged it with a nod and kept his eyes on the float.
The 2 jade eagles came down from their altitude as the light faded, settling on the villa rooftop with the comfortable finality of creatures who had decided this was where they lived now.
He brought the chest ashore, opened it, took what double happiness doubled, sorted the contents, and cast again.
He would fish until the light was gone, and then eat, and then cultivate for 3 hours, and then sleep, and then start again.
The pattern was not glamorous and did not need to be. Glamour was for people who needed an audience, and his audience was a notebook and a panel and a sea full of chests that had not run out in 12 days.
He had a working theory that the sea would not run out.
All worlds drain somewhere.
He was at the drain.
And as long as he was at the drain, the only limit on what he could pull up was how fast he could fish, how well he could read the water, and how effectively he could use whatever surfaced.
The insight talent covered the first 2.
The rest was up to him. The float plunged, and Soyu stood up from the massage chair with the rod in both hands and the evening light behind him, and pulled.
On the regional leaderboard, the name in first place had not changed in 12 days.
In the communication channel, the speculation about how had not produced an answer in 12 days.
In the notebook on the villa table, the plan for the next 12 days was already 3 pages long.
And in the water below the island, the sea continued doing what it had been doing since before Soyu arrived, and would continue doing long after the story caught up to where it was going.
The last thing anyone who studied this story would remember was not the talents, although the talents were extraordinary.
Not the double crab cavalry or the jade eagles or the silver skeleton general with green fire in his skull, although all of those were genuinely remarkable by any standard.
What they would remember was the morning of day 1, when a man woke up on 100 square meters of bare rock in the middle of the ocean with instant noodles and a fishing rod and a terrible chest drop from a golden box,
And decided, without ceremony, to start fishing.
because the fish were there.
And the chests were there.
And the talent to read both of them was there.
And everything else that followed, the goblins and the goblins' loyalty, the robots and the robots' cooking,
The sabers and the serpents, and the cultivation scroll and the invisibility array, and the armored sharks now circling in the deep water below, a villa that stood where Bear Rock used to be, was just what happened when someone with the right tools decided to not stop working.
The sea had no opinion about any of it. The sea just produced chests.
And Soyu just pulled them up.
One cast at a time.
One chest at a time.
One day at a time.
Until the bare rock became an island.
Until the island became a fortress.
Until the fortress became something that required a different word entirely.
And the float dropped again.
And he pulled.
And whatever came up next, he was already ready for it.
That was simply the kind of man that dying once and transmigrating twice had made him.